All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our month or weekly exercise coaching call for December 8th. So first off, does anybody have any questions or uh, specific things that they would like to discuss? Or does anybody have a share, an update, a win? Yes, Linda.
I have pain of the week. So I'm very sorry to say, but it's actually been not for the week. And I think it's okay. I've had it for a couple of months and it's a funny pain. It's kind of one-sided, kind of below my butt. I almost wonder if it's sciatica kind of pain, but would it
Sounds like
mostly not hurt when I'm exercising weirdly. Although sometimes if I'm stretching that side, I can feel it. But it really hurts if I've been sitting or I've been inactive, or even sometimes just laying in bed. It feels like this huge, huge ache. So I don't know if it's okay that it's just not hurting when I'm exercising, or if I should be doing something more to kind of get rid of it.
That's a great question. And it brings up, I'm excited to start having Maddie join some of these calls. She is better in orthopedics than I am, as I was discussing earlier, how much neuro is what's really interesting to me in doing things. So I want to have Maddie start to join some of these calls because she has more orthopedic experience and would be able to kind of talk through like a little bit better than I can. How do you determine if it's a nerve or sciatica versus like a muscle tightness? Um, there are a lot of things that can feel better when you're exercising. Sometimes when it's your joint, it can feel better when you're exercising because exercise and movement lubricates the joint. So in some cases, exercise helps even when it's an orthopedic thing. But when it's Parkinson's, certainly exercise very often helps you feel better versus inactivity. I would say like for it to be sciatica, we often it's kind of the pattern of pain. It may start behind your hip, but a lot of times sciatica kind of goes down your leg, down the back of your leg a bit, even just part way. Versus if it's really isolated in one spot, I would say it's a little bit less likely to be a nerve. Then it's a little bit more likely to maybe be the muscle or where the muscle like connects to your bone. And if it's benefited from exercise and hurts more when you're still, that can be orthopedic, but that also can be related to Parkinson's and like rigidity in the muscle. So when you're moving and exercising, that can help decrease rigidity in your muscles, which can decrease if that's the cause of the pain. And then the longer you're sedentary, it can tighten up a little bit more. Is that pain, does it respond at all to your medication? To Parkinson's medication? Like when you take medication, does it feel like it relieves the pain at all? And does the pain feel like it comes on any more like before you're due for the next dose?
I haven't paid attention to where I am in medication. So that's a really good point. I think I need to. If I've usually been in the car like 2.5 hours and I get out, then whoa, I can feel it then. Or
Mm-hmm.
I can feel it sometimes at night when I'm laying in bed. I don't think it ever goes all the way down past my knee. It might shoot down a little bit, but not too far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'd say most of the time, pain is kind of a combo. Like I would say a lot of times there's going to be a little bit of it is Parkinson's and some of it is orthopedic. And so the good news is there's multiple things that you can do that are helpful. I think for you, since you just recently went through the period of, a rib injury and not being able to exercise the same way you usually do and kind of getting back from that, but then also having holidays and maybe not exercising in quite the same way that you were prior to that. That is one reason that if it is Parkinson's, it could feel a little bit worse right now because exercise levels and consistency has been different. And a lot of times pain, when it is related to Parkinson's, is going to be a little bit delayed after, like if, you had a rib injury for one, that's going to be your main focus. You feel that. But then if your changes in activity and exercise, if there's changes in activity and exercise for a period of time, pain isn't necessarily going to show up right then. It's going to show up a little bit later than that because, your exercise is going to benefit you for a while. And then there's a time frame where the inactivity, now you might be making a little bit less dopamine than you were before. And so your medication is going to quite get you to the level where what you're making yourself and what you're taking for medication was getting you to before. Um, and then, but usually it's that and a little bit of orthopedics as well, because, we all have joints and things are going to be going on with our joints and our nerves. It definitely is helpful though to assess and see if your medication cycle is making a difference with it at all, because that will help kind of tip the scale a little bit. If meds help more, then it might be a little bit more Parkinson's, versus if it doesn't feel like meds make a difference at all, that tips the scales a little bit more towards ortho. And I'd say, exercising and moving is good. Obviously trying to do that consistently each day. And then sometimes it can be helpful if there are, periods of time. Obviously, sleeping overnight, you're going to be sleeping for a while. So then it's kind of just a matter of getting in the most comfortable position possible. Doing a little bit of stretching before bed might be helpful. When it comes to car rides, one thing about car rides is, especially if you're in a sedan and it's more of a bucket seat, sitting with your hips below your knees, things can really tighten up in a car. And that's why you go to get out of the car and like stand up and it's like stretch things that have been in a shortened position, like your hamstrings. What can be helpful in a lot of cases, especially but even if you're a driver, but also if you're a passenger, is using like a towel or a cushion to lift your seat up so that you're sitting in a little bit better position where your hips aren't below your knees and then your knees are in a lot of flexion. If you put like towels folded up on the seat, or find a cushion that kind of is the right size where it lifts you up so you're sitting up a little bit more upright and your hips and knees are a little bit more level, that can feel a lot more comfortable. You don't get quite as tight riding in the car and you're sitting in a little bit better, more upright position. So that can be kind of an easy fix if it's, that if that drive happens on a regular basis or around the holidays, if you're doing more driving. Trying to break it up whenever possible so you're not going too long, and a quick pit stop, even just to get up and walk around for 3 minutes, maybe use the restroom. But that can be helpful. But you should be able to ride in a car for 2.5 hours without having to take a break for that. In that case, though, I think if you just raise up the seat a little bit, you could feel more comfortable getting out of the car. And then, if there are specific exercises that could be helpful, that is something that would be a little bit more Maddie. And so I might check and see even if Maddie's available to join next week for the exercise coaching call. And also if you join any classes where she's live, like I can let her know that you have a question for her. And so then a little bit before or after class, you could ask her and she might be able to tell you quickly. Because there are some relatively standard exercises that can be helpful if it is sciatica or other specific things. And she might be able to get an idea kind of quickly what it is. But I'd say for now, keep moving, assess whether medications feel like it helps, and and even on a couch, like if you're sitting, hanging out, if that couch seat can be bumped up a little bit for you so you're sitting in a little bit better position, you might feel better even sitting for periods of time. Because in a car, like when your hips are below your knees, the hamstrings get tight, your knees are bent more, but your hips are actually like the back of your hip is kind of under a little bit more of a stretch. And so if you can lift the hips up so that you're at more like a 90-90 position, that's a little bit less of a stretch at the hips and less of a shortened position at the knees. So then things don't tighten up in quite the same way when you get out of the car. So try those things and let us know how it goes. And then I'm going to double check, but I think Maddie will be able to join next week. And then I can let everybody know Maddie's going to join. Anything we normally talk about could be talked about, but also anybody who has some specific ortho things, it would be a really good opportunity to ask her about those things.
Thanks. That all makes sense. Thanks.
You're welcome. All right. Who else has updates, questions? Good to see you here, Janice. How is it going for you with exercise? Are you on any restrictions for exercise?
I was, but now it's been more than 6 weeks since my surgery. So they said I can ease into it. So I am, but I'm so deconditioned from just doing nothing for so long. So I've started with the exercise snacks. 15
Very good.
A couple times a day. And I've started with a cardio biking.
Awesome.
But yeah, and so that's helpful. But yeah, I go in for a second programming tomorrow. And one of the things I want to mention is that I have uneven pedaling with the bike. I can't keep up a steady rhythm the whole time. So
Mhm.
that just like little things like that, and it happens when I walk more than a half a mile. All of a sudden, I get really uncoordinated and stuff. But yeah, just trying to take it one day at
Yeah.
a time, and
Yep. Yeah. And it'll all get better as you get back into exercise. Um, is it okay if I share what surgery you had?
sure. I
So
can't do it now.
Janice had DBS surgery. I think many of you maybe already knew that ahead of time that she was going to be getting it. But when you have DBS, I mean, it impacts your brain and, mostly in a very positive way that helps your symptoms, but it usually is going to be different. It'll be better in some ways. What I'd say we see sometimes is like one of the symptoms that helps is rigidity, that muscle tightness, which is obviously very helpful, but sometimes it almost either helps like a little bit too much or just the effect of the help can make someone feel almost or feel or look a little bit floppy. There's the spectrum of things like muscle tightness. And if you can be on the tighter side, or when a treatment is really helping, you can almost get a little bit on the looser side. So that is a pretty common experience, and adjusting the programming will help that get dialed in as much as possible. But you still might notice that there are things that, the DBS helps with or doesn't completely address. And in some cases, exercise is really the best thing to address that. And both for walking and pedaling, building up your endurance will help. You'll be able to go longer, and just really practicing that even walking and even pedaling. Using music and really trying to go to the beat or a metronome even, that's one of the best things when you have that external timing cue that can really help you get your, legs coordinated to be more symmetrical with the timing. So, with our cardio classes, we're playing music, and you might, instead of worrying as much about speed 1 or speed 2, you might say, I'm going to really try to match the timing of the song. Whatever speed it is going, really use the song to help you get on beat and try to be as consistent as possible side to side.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, I used to use a metronome in walking before surgery and everything. I haven't tried it since surgery, but yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. And obviously it just takes time. Having brain surgery is a big deal. Being off exercise for 6 weeks is a big deal. Both of those things together is a double big deal. So obviously it just takes a little bit of time to get back into the routine. But don't be surprised if things are a little bit different than they should be different before afterwards. But coordination is another one that I think kind of goes along with that treatment, where sometimes people do feel just a difference in their coordination from before. But exercise is really the best thing to work on it.
Good. Yeah, and some of the I've done the floor exercises with Maria, I think. Marie.
Mm-hmm.
On the 15-minute classes. I've stuck with the floor exercises, but even some of those, the prone power up, prone position, man, that's hard to get into that position again. And to do, I can't believe how hard it is. But it helps. Repetition helps. Doing the same class over and over helps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes, like I talk about it, when we get into a position that's harder, sometimes it's just getting into that position and hanging out there for a while. You don't always have to do all the exercises, just being in that position and breathing and hanging out for a bit. You'll get more used to it and be able to build from there too.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Very good.
Marie is great, by the way. I really like her.
Awesome. I will pass along that feedback.
Janice?
Yes?
I'm scheduled for DBS. Do you mind if I send you my contact information? We can chat?
Yeah, that's fine. That's
great.
Great.
Thank you.
How do you do that? I mean, like in the chat or something? Or
Yeah, in the chat. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Great. Thanks.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And then if ever for some reason after this call, if one of you is like, oh, I didn't get it, or we didn't get the connection, you can let me know and I can send an email to both of you too.
Okay, good.
All right. Anyone else? Thoughts, questions? Sarah, did you have any questions about that research article?
I feel like I talked too much, so I was trying to wait. The article talked about 80 to 85% of your maximum heart rate for de novo patients, and de novo means untreated with dopamine. Do you think it still matters, like if you are being treated with dopamine?
Yeah, the main reason, I'm pretty sure the main reason that they are doing this research with people not on medication is because that's the best way to evaluate if the treatment is helping. So it's not because they're not saying that it's like better to not be on medication, but just if you're measuring like dopamine response in the brain to exercise, medication is something that just complicates the ability to measure that a little bit. So I think that's why they're specifically doing it in people without medication, is just to have the cleanest measurement that they can to be able to say that exercise is really impacting Parkinson's in the brain.
Good explanation.
So yeah, most people are going to be on medication because most people benefit from it. It helps with symptoms. It helps them exercise better. So this is where, like, when I talk about the research in exercise, there are hundreds of studies that have shown that being between 60 and 80% of heart rate max is beneficial. And, there's slightly different amounts and different forms of exercise, but in general, that's what it shows. So most of the time when we're working, the goal is to get above 60%. Some people might be able to get up to 70 or 80. Not everybody can, work at that level. And this is why also the cardiopulmonary exercise testing could be helpful, because some people might feel like I can't get to 80, but maybe it's really because the estimate is not accurate. And if they had a correct number for their max heart rate, they might be able to have a better calculated estimate. So that's where it's kind of complicated as to, like, if you're at 60, 70, or 80, if that's true, if you really truly know your physiologic max heart rate. But I do think that there is a difference in, the intensity levels. So 60% is the first goal. And then ideally over time, people are trying to achieve slightly higher heart rates during exercise over time, and kind of seeing like whatever is the most that person can do, where they feel it's hard, but they feel good during and afterwards. That's the goal. And so some people are going to be able to get up to that 80 to 85%. Whether 80 to 85% is better than 60 to 65%, probably for some people it's better. That study, it's the SPARKS study, which there's the published one is SPARKS 2. There is an ongoing study right now called SPARKS 3. And the type of exercise they're looking at specifically is treadmill training. People are doing it 3 to 4 times a week. And they're split into 2 groups. One that is being instructed to work at 60 to 65 versus one that's working at 80 to 85. And so then they're comparing. And these are people specifically that have been diagnosed for less than 3 years. So that's obviously a specific subset of the population as well. And then are not taking medication.
My son is calling. I have to step out for just a second.
Yeah, no worries. So in this case, the SPARKS 2 study, they did show that for this population that are within 3 years of being diagnosed, that are not taking medication, they experienced less change in their symptoms. The group that was working at 80 to 85% experienced less change in their symptoms over the course of, I think it was about 2 years, than the people working at 60 to 65%. So they're saying, working at that higher intensity level is better because we see less decline in a UPDRS score. So I think for many people that higher intensity level is good, but it doesn't mean it's better for everyone. There are many factors that influence what is the right exercise program for someone: age, how long someone's had Parkinson's, comorbidities. If someone has a pain in their knee and trying to pedal faster or exercise at a higher intensity level makes their knee really hurt and makes them not be able to exercise as consistently, then higher intensity level is not better for that person. Doing a more steady state, whatever level helps their knee feel better, is right. And for most people over time, they probably will be able to incrementally increase that intensity level and do a little bit more, but it takes time. When you're, trying to kind of do some remodeling of your joints, this is something that's going to take months to years for that joint to move better and feel better and allow you to exercise at a higher intensity level. But more intense is not always better. More intense may be better for some people under certain circumstances, but not better for everyone. So that is important to know, and that the vast majority of the research shows between 60 and 80% is beneficial. And so that's kind of our first goal, is trying to just at least get over that 60% threshold, and then see kind of what is possible for that individual person based on everything else that is going on for them health-wise. And in that study, in the Sparks 2 and 3, I believe for both of them, they took, now I can't remember exactly how much time, I think it was 6 weeks. I think they took 6 weeks at the beginning, basically, to go from wherever that person was currently with exercise up to the point of the higher intensity. So they expected to try to be able to get someone who was, in the 80 to 85% group in 6 weeks. We want you to be able to exercise at 80 to 85%. It wasn't like you're in the study and we want you to do that immediately. They had 6 weeks of buildup time of working at working your way up, first 60%, then 65, 70, 75%, then 80 over time, so that you're building your endurance and fitness levels during that time. And then once they got to that point, then the study was 6 months long, I believe, or maybe it was 4.5 months at that time. I'm not sure if the 6 weeks is included. I have to look at the exact study protocol again. But there was a months of time where now they're asking people to work, aiming for 4 days a week, because knowing it's not necessarily going to happen every single week, all 4 days. So if you miss a day, you're still getting the 3 days a week. That does appear to be kind of the minimum frequency. So 3 to 4 times a week, 30, 45 minutes, and bulk of that time in that higher intensity range. So, yeah. All right. Any other updates, questions? Gail, how is your foot doing?
I I took the boot off yesterday and just used a foot drop brace, and my foot is sore today, and I have the boot back on.
Mm-hmm. And it might be like, did you go the whole day without the boot?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you want to wean. Like if today you're wearing it again, maybe tomorrow would be like 75% of waking, moving hours with it, 25 with it off, and do that for a couple days. And then maybe 50-50, and then maybe flip 75% off, 25% on. Maybe a little bit more of a weaning process would help it out.
Yeah, that should probably help.
But it takes a lot of thinking sometimes to do those calculations. So, I mean, you might also just feel like it could be in every other day. Like if wearing the boot today helps it feel better, maybe you feel like tomorrow you could go most of the day without, and it'll just be more of a weaning, but an every other day type of weaning, as opposed to a percentage of time, whatever's easiest to kind of organize for yourself and feels like it's okay for your ankle. But,
Yeah.
All right. Well, good that you at least were able to go sometime without it. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Mhm.
our team up on the steps has worked out real well. I'm really enjoying it. I think Billy is too.
Yeah, Gail's been kicking my butt the last 3 days, though. She's been racking the steps up.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
and it is nice. It is nice because you can encourage each other and just try to spark each other on.
Mm-hmm. And you're doing that over text, basically?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, for anyone else on this call who would love to have like an accountability buddy, there's the potential, I think, for there to be a buddy system where it's just, 2 people communicating. I also think like when it comes to chat, having a small group chat is not, too unwieldy. Like if there were, 4, 5, 6 people who all wanted to be able to have those check-ins, I think that's something that could happen. And then it's fun to be able to hear, from multiple people too. So if there's anybody else who's interested in, you ladies right now are working specifically on increasing steps per day. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be that everybody has the same goals, but it's kind of helpful when you can have a check-in and, yeah, at noon, be like, okay, I've already gotten 3,000 steps for the day. And then once it's kind of wind down time in the evening, like I got to this many, 4,000, 5,000, whatever it is. And when it comes to steps, some of you maybe heard, some of you didn't. There was a study that came out recently that took a whole bunch of different studies looking at different things and put those together to do what's called a meta-analysis, where they look at a bunch of studies and see, okay, what does research actually say? There was 10,000's been out there for a long time. And that was kind of just a made up number where 10,000 is a good number of steps, but there wasn't necessarily research to say, like, if you get over that threshold, how much of a difference does it make? With all this research, what they found is that 7,000 steps per day is really an inflection point where once you get over that threshold of 7,000, mortality rates are significantly reduced. I think it was like 47%. Risk of fall significantly reduced. Risk of dementia significantly reduced. So a specific step number that then is related to multiple significant health outcomes. So 7,000 steps a day is a good target to have. And again, whether that's what your goal is right this second depends on how many steps you're taking already. So the first step is to devise a way of measuring your steps, whether you're going to have a Fitbit, an Apple Watch, wear your phone on your body in a fanny pack, more consistently to measure. And the first step would just be to see, for at least like 1 to 3 days, what's kind of average for you. Because if you're taking 1,000 or 2,000 steps per day and you set a goal of 7,000, you may not reach that. Or if you do, you might feel bad. When it comes to steps, just like other exercise, you want to take where you're at now, what your goal is, and kind of work your way up incrementally. But it's a great goal to set, and you're going to get credit when you do exercise. Most of our exercise classes, you're going to get some steps credit, and going for a walk, walking around your house, a lot of the things that you do already, you're going to get credit for. But you might notice that, for a lot of us, like weeks have kind of an ebb and flow, and there might be certain days where you're busier and you're out and about and you naturally get more steps. And some days you're at home more and you don't get as many steps. Even for me being here at Rogue, my days can be very different. Some days I'm at my desk and I might be standing at my desk, but I'm not getting steps during that time. Versus today, I already did 2 assessments where I go out and do the 6-minute walk test with people. And that really helps me get more steps. So I am already at 5,800 and I haven't done any exercise for myself, but I did those assessments. And how you get those steps, yes, you could go for a longer walk one time, but you also could do shorter, 5 to 10 minute walks a few times during the day, which, going for a walk after meals is really great. Or, I had one of the gentlemen I did an assessment with today. He was saying he really doesn't feel good walking for longer distances. And I'm like, okay, then doing multiple short walks is going to be better for you. Than doing one longer walk. So that's, I think, the fun thing with steps is that there's so many different ways to get those steps in.
What we do in terms of checking in is when I go to bed, I just type in how many I've had and send it to Billy. And I think after that, she types in to me how far she's gotten. And then I read hers in the morning.
Yeah, different time zones, different communication times.
Yeah, we're two time zones apart.
Very cool. But yeah, even it's fun to see others' numbers and be motivated. But for a lot of us, just some level of accountability where I'm going to send that number to someone at the end of the day, makes us get more steps in than if we didn't have that accountability. Yeah. So that makes me think too, when we do our challenges in 2026, where we set goals, it would be really fun to have a way of communicating about that, where we do a check-in. And so it's kind of just thinking what's the best way to do that? Is it text? And is it we actually have a group text during that time? There also are other apps that you can use for communication where we use one for communicating here at Rogue amongst our team called Slack. That is a separate app that you download. But then it's kind of separate and a little bit different than, having a huge text group to kind of manage. So that's something we'll have to figure out too, because I do think that ability to have a, touch base on a daily basis as much as each person wants to is something that's helpful. And it would be cool. It'd be cool data for us to see also.
My husband just did a competition with some guys and they had tiers about their competition ability, if they could do chin-ups and that kind of how much weight they could lift. but most of the points were accumulated by your diligence in recording, not your skill in activity, which was very encouraging for my husband.
Yeah. And that's where I think, having something like a target number and then having like a percentage towards your goal is really helpful. And for each person, it's individual. Like one person, their goal might be 2,000 steps per day, and another person is 7,000. So then in competition, it's not really like who got more steps, it's who got closer to what their goal was on any given day. And I think we're in a place where like, it's not really competition amongst, we're all like cheering for each other and just looking at things just in a little bit different way, like setting a goal and then checking in each day to see if we're making progress towards that goal, like is the success, too. Cause it's just, we're trying to like build habits that are lifelong.
That's good. I'm sorry about having to leave. I'll listen to the call recording, but I have a couple questions. Like, what's the assessment and what's the value of getting it? And what do I do about feeling like a 2-year-old in church every time I sit down on a chair? So wiggly. And how do you know if you're taking too much medicine? If you want to answer any of those questions.
Yeah. So your question about trying to sit still in church if it's hard. So do you think you're having dyskinesia, the extra movements?
Well, yeah, the doctor says I have off dyskinesia. So when the medication's too low, I'll be wiggly. But it's not just church. Like anytime I sit down, it's like right now, I'm a 2-year-old in church in your meeting, right?
And is it, when you're sitting there, is it movement that's happening and it is like you don't feel like you can control it, or do you feel antsy and like you have to move?
Pretty uncomfortable. There's movement with my foot where it's like constantly going. So that's dyskinesia, but I'm mostly just trying to get to a place where I feel more comfortable, right?
Yeah. So it can be a little bit of both, like that antsiness or discomfort is a little bit different than dyskinesia. And so sometimes, you're moving because you're trying to get comfortable. So if it's off, if it's happening when you're off, then it's, trying to really get medications as optimized as possible. And in some cases, you might have kind of a regular schedule with your medications of timing, the amount you take and what times you take it. There might be certain activities, like this happened with one of our members who was experiencing dyskinesia. She did a pretty kind of deep dive study, and she found that it wasn't just linked with medication. It wasn't like when it's an hour after she took her medication or as she was wearing off. It wasn't as clear cut related to medication timing. It was more about what she was doing. So it was when she went out to dinner and was like in a social setting, she noticed that that's kind of what brought it out a little bit more. So if you identify more that you have sort of certain triggers, there are things that you can do. For one is still kind of assessing your medication timing, and you might make adjustments. Like if I feel my best an hour or two after medication, it might be like for church on Sundays, maybe you adjust your medication timing a little bit so that when you're at church is the time where you feel your best. So one is that, medication dose and timing can be adjusted a little bit depending on the day to just support you in being as comfortable as possible when you're doing the activities you're doing. If you notice that you feel better when you exercise, like trying to make sure that exercise could fit in before church, if at all possible, depending on when church happens. If it is that it happens when dopamine is low, but you kind of have a regular schedule that you don't want to adjust, then we have some people who take a little boost dose, and it might be something like half of a carbidopa, levodopa, like not their full dose that they normally take, but they just take a little extra to help kind of their system calm a little bit. Doing something like arriving to church 10 or 15 minutes early and just going for a bit of a walk before could help kind of, work things out a little bit. So then you feel like you can be more still in church. Doing a guided meditation before. So if you arrive a little bit early and listen on Insight Timer to like a 5-minute guided meditation that just helps kind of calm your system before you go into church, that could also be helpful as well. So medication adjustments, a little bit of exercise before, some walking before, just to kind of work some things out, or guided meditation, depending if you feel like you are a little bit low on dopamine, if you feel like you're a little bit higher in dopamine levels, like what you can do to kind of adjust that. And then breathing, like even just when you're sitting in church, trying to just have your feet be grounded, and take some deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth, and doing kind of that grounding activity of, while you're sitting and listening, saying like, okay, what is one thing I can feel? What is one thing I can smell? What is something I can see? What is something I can hear? Doing things that like kind of get you grounded in your body can help your body settle more as well. And that can help, whether it's the levels of dopamine are a little bit higher or lower, that can help either way. Get you a little bit more settled. Yeah, great question. And then, okay, those are the second two questions. And then what was the first question again?
The assessment, the value of the assessment, and what happens after.
Yeah, so we have an assessment that we do, and with our in-person membership, it is not required per se, but it's included in the membership. And we do kind of expect that all of our in-person members do an assessment when they first join, and then we do the assessment every 6 months. And then for online members, we don't include it because it's a little bit harder to do online. It is possible, but it's a little bit different. For in-person, what happens is people come in and we test about 12 different things. I did 2 assessments today. So I'm just going to pull out my little marking sheet. So we look at a bunch of different areas of mostly physical functioning. We look at fine motor dexterity with a test called a 9-hole peg test, where we're lifting pegs, putting them in these holes, and then taking them back out, back and forth. We do that on both hands. We look at grip strength using a dynamometer. So a dynamometer is, basically a device that measures strength. I don't know if there's more of a definition to it than that. And I can do a kind of a show and tell for the assessment one time during one of these calls. Then we look at processing speed with a test called trail making, where the first one is a bunch of dots on a sheet, numbers 1 through 25. And there's a practice one, and then the 1 through 25 is the test. And you draw a line connecting the dots in numerical order as fast as you can and as accurately as you can. And that's looking at processing speed. Then there's a second version of trail making called Trail B, which is numbers and letters. And in that case, you're going back and forth between numbers and letters. So 1, A, then 2, then B, 3, C, around this sheet of paper. That's looking at processing speed and also a high level cognitive skill called set shifting. So all day long, we're thinking or unconsciously doing one thing, and then we have to go do something else, and then back and forth between different activities. And our brain's ability to switch back and forth and keep track of what we're doing when we're doing it, and then what needs to happen next and how that needs to happen, how easily and well our brain can switch between activities makes a big difference in how we feel throughout the day. If your brain is low with that switch, or it's hard to do it, that's going to make like your whole life harder. So this is a pen and paper assessment that we can look and just see how well is that going. And that gives us some insight into cognitive health as well, which cognitive health is super important. We then look at functional leg strength, standing up and sitting down from a chair for 60 seconds and counting how many repetitions. We do a turn in place to look and see kind of how smoothly and efficiently someone steps when they turn 360 degrees each direction. Both the speed and the number of steps matter. Then we look at single leg balance. How long can someone balance on each leg? We do a task called timed up and go, where you're sitting in a chair, you stand up, walk around a cone, come back and sit down. That is timed. And we're also looking at the quality of those transitions. Then we do the tug with a dual task, where you're counting backwards out loud by 3s while you're walking. So we see what happens when you're distracted, because real life includes a lot of distractions. We then measure walking speed over a 10-meter distance, and we look at what is someone's comfortable walking speed and fast walking speed. We look at agility, stepping in different directions, with a test called the 4-square step test. We do 2 different floor transfers. One is people are standing, they get down on their stomach and back up once for speed. And then we also do a test where people get down into sitting and back up. That one is not for time. The goal is to use the fewest number of limbs possible to get down and back up. And then we do a 6-minute walk test, where we walk for 6 minutes. And that is a test of endurance. The goal is to see how far someone can walk in 6 minutes. So when we're doing that in person, we have all the different areas where we do these tests set up. We do them all the time, so it's easy to run through them. When we do this test online, there's basically a combination. There are some of these items that we can do on Zoom with the person where they are, but then some of the things we can't really do on Zoom, like the 6-minute walk test, we can't really do that on Zoom. So usually what we do when we do an assessment with someone online is we send you some information ahead of time. and we say, okay, here's the test that we'd like you to do kind of on your own or with your spouse or with a friend or one of your children or something, that they're going to help you do these assessments, and you're going to kind of do a setup and then measure them for us and let us know what the score is. And then we're going to do a few of the assessments online together on Zoom, and then we're going to talk about it afterwards. And basically what we're looking at, so we test you in all these areas. When we first do the assessment, what we're comparing you to is age norms. So we ahead of time get what your age is, whether you're a man or a woman. And there have been all these different studies that have happened over time where they've taken men and women and, distributed them by age. And these are all people who do not have any health conditions. And so they test them and they see what is average, for a woman in her 40s, in her 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and same thing for men. In some cases, it's the whole decade, but in many cases, it's split like your early 50s versus your late 50s, early 60s, late 60s, because obviously things change as we're aging, and that average is going to be different over time. So when we first do the assessment, that's what we have to compare to is age norms. And so we can tell you, okay, in these areas you are at or above age norm. In these areas you are below. And so that's, then that's the area that we really want to focus on to bring you up to age norms. And then on subsequent assessments for our in-person members, we do the assessment every 6 months. For an online member who wants to do the assessment, we would do that the first time when they want to, and then subsequent assessments, it could happen every 6 months. It could happen once per year. It could happen when you want it to happen. It's a little bit more, based on what is helpful for you in terms of the information. Many of the assessment things that we do, once you set them up once, you could do them yourself. When we write up the assessment, just fold over the person's name. But so this is what it looks like when I'm first filling it out for someone's assessment. It started with 9-hole peg test at the beginning. And so I wrote down, they did a couple times on each side. So this was his second assessment. So on this side is what he did today. In the middle is what he did 6 months ago. And on the right side is what age norms are. So when we do an assessment with you, we will do a write-up like this and send it to you. So you will see like what age norm is, and then you could practice and you could measure yourself. For many of these things, you don't even necessarily have to do it as an assessment with us. And I would that's something, we haven't done the online assessments as much recently. That's another kind of project where I'd like to pick which are the easiest ones to do on your own at home, and you don't need any special equipment. And then for anyone who wants to do those, we can have a little YouTube video that shows you how, and whether you measure yourself or you have someone to measure it with you. And then you can look yourself to see, am I at age norms or how far am I from them? So then we do that every 6 months or whatever frequency is helpful to someone. And then once we're done, we usually kind of summarize how things went. We make some recommendations and we set some goals for the next time. And these little check marks. So when we first do the assessment, there's basically only 2 places for check marks. One column is if there's room for improvement. One column is if they're at age norm or better. So that kind of makes it easy to just scan through and kind of see where you're at. Like, yep, mostly age norms or mostly room for improvement. When we have subsequent assessments, we look at whether someone is at age norm or better, whether they've kind of maintained or improved since the last assessment, and then if there's room for improvement. So there's some combination of check marks when we do subsequent assessments. And so, I think for a lot of our members in person, they feel a little bit stressed and a little bit of performance anxiety about doing the assessment. But the thing about the assessment is it is just giving us information. It's really not good or bad. It's just, here's what's happening right now. And it gives us information that we can then make choices and recommendations from. And for us, in terms of data as a program, having this data is something that eventually, hopefully, we get the opportunity to publish, with a researcher and show that when people are doing this kind of, research-based exercise, they are doing better than people who aren't. They're able to, be more fit, have better balance, reduce risk of falls, be stronger, be more functional in their life. That's what we really care about. The other thing that's interesting about this assessment is we are not measuring Parkinson's directly or only in any of these things. Parkinson's can contribute to performance in all of these assessments, but so do other things. So, people's history of athleticism or hobbies, if someone did crochet or instruments, like they might be better at fine motor activities than someone who played soccer and didn't do a lot of fine motor dexterity type activities. So someone's history, we all have kind of natural tendencies to be better at some things than others. And then what you do for exercise makes a difference as well. But all of these things, Parkinson's is one aspect that influences performance, but so do a lot of other things. And, other past medical history, orthopedic things, previous injuries, all of those kind of contribute. But as physical therapists, what we care about is function. We care, can you balance? How easily is it to stand up from a chair? How easy is it to tie your shoelaces and button things and zipper things? So that's what we really care about, is the functional ability.
That is a good explanation. And I wish I had done it when I came to you, because something you said to me is this is only the start of feeling better. And it's so true. When I look at how I was 6 months ago to how I am now, I would already be doing so much better on the assessment. Thank you.
Yeah. So and so at the beginning is a great time to do an assessment, and the next best time is whenever you know about it or think about it. I think, just don't know for sure when I'll be able to do it, and maybe what we do time-wise, one of these times during this exercise coaching call, since my time is already dedicated to be here, like maybe one time I kind of go through and demo the assessment, and then we could take we could cut that video into the little sections of showing like, this is how you do this on your own at home. For fine motor control, the 9-hole peg test that we use is a specific, like standardized little plastic peg and thing. It is not, because it's used medically, it's not inexpensive. It's probably worth like $4, and it's sold for like $60 online.
Cool.
So in most cases, we haven't really recommended that people purchase that for their own at home. But if you think about long-term use, and if you want to be able to do kind of standardized tests, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world to purchase it. Dynamometers are also not inexpensive. So most of the time we haven't recommended that people purchase those things to do the assessments on their own at home. For fine motor, for the 9-hole peg test, what we did is we developed basically a coin flip test, where we have a piece of paper that has a circle where you would put 9 coins in it. And then we have circles where those coins would go. And so it simulates the 9-hole peg test relatively well with things that you can have at home. We can send you a PDF of that piece of paper, you print it out, and then you collect, can't remember what coins we decided on. If it was like nickels or quarters, it kind of doesn't matter as long as you used the same type of coins as you test from one time to the next. But we found like if you picked up those coins and you flipped it over and put it in the little circle where they go, it simulated the 9-hole peg test pretty well without having to purchase it. For grip strength, the dynamometer, I don't think is necessary to buy at home unless you wanted to. That's one that if you had access to going to a physical therapist locally, there's a good chance they're going to have it. So that could be a test that you do there. Trail making is one that's just a PDF that you print off and you draw the line connecting the dots in order. So there's no cost to that. Functional leg strength, standing up and sitting down from a chair. You don't have to purchase any equipment. Turning in place, single leg balance. Walking balance, the tug is just one that you have to measure a specific distance. Walking velocity, you measure over a specific distance. So having an actual stopwatch is a good idea because, let's see, what was I going to say? Got distracted for a second. Oh yeah. Like a lot of people now measure on their phones. I am not a fan of that because I feel like it's just a little bit harder to like tap and make sure it starts and stops at the right time. And then you're having to hold the whole thing. And if you were to lose your balance, like I want you just be able to, not be holding on to it. So I feel pretty strongly about like old school actual stopwatches that go around your neck. So it could be hands-free. And ideally someone is testing you or timing you for these things. Ideally, you're not the one timing yourself because that already adds a cognitive secondary task to everything that you're doing. So ideally, you kind of get things set up and then someone is timing you and just telling what your times are. But having a stopwatch is a good idea. That is inexpensive. The agility test we do, we use a PVC pipe that's set in a cross that you step over, which isn't too expensive, but takes a little bit of work to make it. That is something where you could just put a cross like with tape on the ground. It's not exactly the same because you don't have that 1 or 2 inches of height to step over, but being able to step in different directions, even without an obstacle, is the important thing that we're looking at for that one. So that's a pretty easy setup. getting down to the floor and back up. You don't need any special equipment. It's just a mat. And then walking endurance for the 6-minute walk test. We walk a 100-foot track. So basically measuring 100 feet with a tape measure or with a little roller if you had it. And then timing the 6 minutes as you walk back and forth, and you basically keep track of how many times you do it. So most of these can be done without any special equipment. Having a second person to time you is very helpful. But a lot of them are things that you can do without purchasing. So we can pick, probably that is what I'll do, is schedule one of these exercise coaching calls to basically run through and kind of demo it for anyone that's interested. And even if you just pick like 1 or 2 of the things to do, you don't have to do all of them, but you could pick a couple things that are most meaningful to you. The other thing is I'm happy to share this template. And so if you do have a physical therapist that you work with locally, you could say, hey, I'd really like help going through this one time to get some baseline numbers and look and see where I'm at. Physical therapist should pretty much be able to do all of these things with you. There might be a couple things that they're not familiar with. They may not do trail making that often. But most things they should be able to figure out or pretty quickly be able to learn how to do too.
I would love that form. I'm going to PT tomorrow, so that'd be great.
All right. I will email that to you.
Sweet. That's such good information, Claire. Thank you.
You're welcome. And remind me, ideally, I'm going to set it up so it has your age norms on there already. So remind me what your age is.
48.
All right. Well, 2:02, time flies when you're talking about assessments, for me at least. Yeah, I know assessments are kind of scary because it's like testing, but again, it is just putting numbers to what is true at this time, what is happening. And there's that quote, like, you can't really improve what you don't measure. So as physical therapists, we believe strongly in that we need to have some data to know where we're at. And ideally, we are identifying strengths and we're saying, like, you're doing great at this, good work, keep it up. And we're also identifying deficits and saying, okay, here's where if we work on this to improve it, you're going to feel and do a lot better. And just being proactive about things over time can really make a big difference rather than putting your head in the sand and like ignoring what is happening. And then getting to a certain point where it's like, well, now these things are a problem. And just the longer you wait to address things that are a problem, the harder it is to really make significant improvements. So it's better to be aware of any challenges as soon as possible to be able to address them. But different people have different, approaches. And some people are like, I don't want to know what this says. And sometimes we do the assessment and we're like, if you don't want to know the data, that's fine. Like, we can have the data. We can still give you guidance without telling you what your performance was. But most people, like, maybe they will have had a setback or a challenging time. They got sick and they haven't been able to exercise for a month, and then they might be feeling worse. And then, the assessment's probably going to show that. But then the good news is if you get back in that regular routine with exercise, you're probably going to experience improvement again. And the other assessment that I did this morning, it was really fun to see. This is a guy who is pretty newly diagnosed. Pretty recently diagnosed. And we did his first assessment 6 months ago. He's been exercising. He comes here 2 times a week. He's not doing anything crazy. He is at age norm or better, 73. He is at age norm or better in every single item we tested now, and he improved in every single item that we tested.
Wow.
So that is really cool to see. And, so sometimes the assessment results can be really fun to get. And whether you got better or whether your age norms in more areas than you were before, that's really can be fun to see too. So it's all about mindset. If you hear data that you're not too excited about, this is good information for me to make choices based off of.
Yeah, Claire. Plus, it's nice to share that with your neurologist too. When you gave me my copies, I made copies for the neurologist, and she really appreciated that.
So you've done the assessment, Billy?
Pardon me?
You did the assessment?
Yes, I've done it twice with Claire, but I was in person. I'd gone to her gym. Yeah.
I did it online and with what's the girl's name who is in Arizona?
Emily.
Emily. Yes, I did it with Emily, and that was really good information to have.
Yeah. And it's very different. Like what you do with your neurologist is usually the UPDRS, the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale, where it's this and this. And that's a little bit more assessing symptoms of Parkinson's. How your symptoms of Parkinson's correlate to your function is variable. You know, some symptoms of Parkinson's, the greater they are, the more it's going to affect your function. But sometimes something like tremor can be really significant, but doesn't affect, other than maybe fine motor dexterity, doesn't affect your function at all otherwise. So like, you know, having UPDRSR data with your neurologist is really good. Having functional assessment data with a physical therapist is good. And then the third type of assessment I really like, which, Sarah, I don't know if you filled this out. Have you done the Pro-PD before?
Yeah, that's so helpful.
Okay. The Pro-PD I really like as well. So that is basically a self-assessment. That's a questionnaire that you go through and assess your experience of Parkinson's on a whole bunch of different things. And so that is a great measurement of like what you are experiencing. And that is different from what your doctor sees. It's different from what a physical therapist measure. And all of those are really helpful. And same thing, you know, with the UPDRS, some people have like what I would consider like strong symptoms, but it doesn't really bother them, or vice versa. Some people, I would say, like, I barely notice any symptoms and they are very bothered by certain things. And so it's really enlightening both to share. If you fill out a Pro-PD, it's very enlightening to show your neurologist what your experience is, to show a physical therapist that you're working with, to show a spouse or family member, because that's the thing with Parkinson's. Some symptoms are visible, but some are not. And I did a whole educational lecture about the Pro-PD and different ways that it could be used. That's in the video library that I highly recommend watching if you haven't already, because I think it's a very helpful communication tool to, you know, help everybody understand like what you are experiencing and what is bothersome to you, because it's not always, you know, observable.
Well, my neurologist had never heard of the Pro-PD or his physical therapist or any of their teams. So yeah, really big deal.
Yeah, it's common because it was Dr. Mishley who developed it. And, you know, Dr. Mishley is a naturopathic doctor. And there are some states where being a naturopathic doctor is illegal. Like there aren't any. And if there aren't any of those professionals in your state, it's less likely that the doctors know about them. Or some naturopathic doctors are very like on the far alternative side of medicine that can be harmful. Like there are naturopathic doctors who tell people not to take any pharmaceutical medications and run them through these really ridiculous, expensive, not research-based protocols. So I would say a lot of medical doctors in the mainstream, they're either going to not know about naturopathic doctors, or they're more likely to have a negative connotation with naturopathic doctors than a positive connotation, because like Dr. Mishley is a very unique naturopathic doctor who is very pro-science and pro-Western traditional treatment. She's not telling anyone to not take medication. She's just saying like, that's not the only thing that's going to be helpful for you. But yeah, that questionnaire I would say is not very widely understood amongst like the movement disorders neurologists. And if the ones who do know about her are probably a little bit more West Coast too,
cool.
Since she's on the West Coast as well.
Rewatch your video. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Any last things before we wrap up today? All right. So I'm going to invite Maddie next week. So next week, for anybody that has any orthopedic things going on, any aches, pains, wondering if it's a joint, if it's a nerve, if it's something else, Maddie will join next week to be able to help parse those things out a bit. And then we'll schedule a time sometime in the next few weeks to go through and talk about the assessment a little bit more in depth. And then I'll have kind of things organized so that anybody who wants to do a few of those things on their own at home, or if you want to do the assessment with us online, let us know.
Great.
All right. Thank you all for joining today. Great discussion. I'll see you all next time.
Thanks,
Claire.
you.
Thanks so much.
You look
Bye.
good, Janice.